It all happened on a night like any other. I was home alone with my computer and I wanted to access the dark web. I had done it before with friends and I was always curious to go further. I wasn't trying to buy anything or do anything crazy. I was just curious, and the whole challenge made me feel like I was doing something important, even though I knew it was mostly boredom. When the last setting finally clicked and the browser opened a hidden page, I felt a quick rush. Not strong, but enough to keep me there. The first sites looked outdated and almost harmless. I scrolled through them without much interest because everything looked like bad forms or broken links. For a moment, I wondered why people made such a big deal out of all of this, because what I was seeing felt cheap and pointless. I clicked through a list of black market pages that didn't surprise me at all, since most seemed empty or full of junk I didn't care about. My curiosity started fading. I wanted something shocking, but not too shocking, something that felt like a secret without being dangerous. Before closing everything, I decided to try something stupid. I searched for the name of a guy from school and got nothing. Then I searched for a neighbor and again got nothing. I almost closed the browser. That's when the screen changed from boring junk to something that made me lean forward without even noticing. A long list of folders appeared, each with a strange title made of different letters and numbers. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The dates on the right side went back 10 years. The exact year we moved across the country without much explanation. Seeing that timing made my chest tighten. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, steady way that made me nervous. I clicked one folder and saw a list of video files. I clicked another folder and it was the same thing. Every folder was full of videos with the same kind of names, like someone followed a pattern. I sat there staring because it didn't make any sense that searching for my parents would lead to this. I started wondering if someone had used their names for something illegal or if someone had tried to follow them. Before opening a video, I hesitated. I didn't want to see something awful, but I needed to know if this involved them or just someone else with the same names. After a long moment of convincing myself I was overthinking, I clicked a random file. The video showed the outside of my old house. My parents stepped out of the car like any normal evening, except a young man walked behind them, very close, keeping his head down. Neither of my parents looked at him. The sight made my stomach twist. I clicked another video because I needed answers. And this time, the screen showed a basement. A young man was tied to a chair, shaking and gagging, struggling to breathe. I recognized the basement right away. It was ours. I kept staring at the screen because I expected the video to glitch or cut or reveal a prank. But it didn't. The boy cried through the gag, and his legs jumped with every breath. That was when fear started getting real. Not panic, but a feeling that I no longer understood who my parents were. I clicked the next video even though every part of me wanted to stop. I needed clarity, even if the answers scared me. Before the video loaded, I felt a tightness in my throat because I could tell something heavier was coming. I waited without moving, and when the next image appeared, I felt a cold rush spread down my arms. The camera pointed at my parents walking into the basement wearing pig masks. Their steps were slow and steady. And the boy jerked in the chair when he saw them approach. My father rolled a table of tools next to him while my mother adjusted the ropes with a calmness that didn't match the situation. The next video showed my father hitting the boy repeatedly with controlled movements like he had practiced this before. The boy's body shook each time, and the sound was so clear that I moved back from the laptop. The next file showed my mother holding a hammer. She pressed nails into the boy's arms and forced them in one at a time while he tried to scream through the gag, and his whole body twisted in pain. A wave of nausea hit me so hard that I had to cover my mouth. The next video showed the boy vomiting from the pain and choking because he couldn't spit anything out. His head was jerking forward, and tears ran down his face as he tried to breathe through blocked air. The next file showed my parents removing sections of skin from the boy's cheek. Their hands didn't shake. Their breathing was steady. They were focused. I scrolled through the files quickly, desperate to stop seeing more, but unable to stop looking. Every scroll revealed more videos, more dates, more proof that this wasn't edited. It had happened in that basement, in the house where I slept as a kid without knowing anything was going on below me. I opened another video and the screen stayed black for a moment. I stared at it, knowing something worse was about to begin, because silence in those recordings always meant a new step. When the video finally started, I heard a loud motor, heavy and fast, echoing through the basement. A chainsaw. The moment the sound hit, I snapped the laptop shut so fast I felt the impact through my fingers. My body pushed back against the wall because I didn't want to hear anything else. I didn't even want to breathe. I forced myself to open the laptop again because I needed to close everything. But when the page refreshed, something new appeared. A new folder with my name on it. I couldn't process it. I stared at my own name like it didn't belong to me. I didn't touch anything. I didn't blink. My hands were shaking so hard that the laptop screen blurred for a second. I didn't know if the folder had been created just now or if it had always been there and I hadn't noticed. But the idea that someone had added it while I was watching the videos made my chest hurt. Before I could react, I heard a car door outside. I froze completely because my parents weren't supposed to be home yet. Another car door closed and footsteps moved across the driveway. My heartbeat got so loud it felt like it was hitting the inside of my skull, and I backed away from the laptop as if distance would help. The footsteps reached the front door. Keys rattled. The lock turned. I looked around the room and realized I had nowhere to go. The windows were too high. The hallways were narrow. I was trapped with the memory of what I had just seen and the fear that they already knew I had found it. The door opened downstairs. Their voices were calm, talking about groceries or something normal, and that normal tone only made the situation worse. Their footsteps moved toward the stairs. I grabbed the laptop and shut the lid so hard the hinge cracked. Then I sat on the floor because my legs felt unsteady. I held the laptop against my chest like a shield, even though it couldn't protect me from anything. Their steps came up slowly. My door opened without knocking, and my mother stood there with a relaxed smile like she had no idea what was happening inside my mind. Nothing matched what I had seen in the videos. It felt like two versions of them existed at the same time. My mother stayed near the door and spoke with a cheerful voice. "We brought something special for you." And she smiled with a look I had never seen before. I wondered what was happening, if any of this was real, until...
My name is Henry, and since my wife passed away, I spend too many nights awake without anything to do. My daughter, Sophia, is now a teenager and spends all her time in her room or with her friends. So when the house gets quiet, I fall into the same routine. I know it's not right, but it was my guilty pleasure. It became part of my life before I even noticed. I didn't expect it to turn into something dangerous. It all began when I found a dark web page some months ago. It had no design, just a list of links with strange codes. When I clicked one, it showed a live feed of a grocery store. Another was a parking lot. Another was someone's kitchen. All private cameras that should not be online. I kept returning because it was the only thing that distracted me when the nights got long. I didn't do it because I felt it was important. I did it because I felt nothing. One night started just like the others. I turned on the computer, put on the headphones, and opened the same page I always checked. I thought it would be another quiet night of watching people who didn't know I existed. I had no idea I was about to see something that would break every sense of safety I had left. The site had a new section called Street Index. It looked like a random collection of neighborhoods, each with feeds from different angles. I clicked through a few out of simple curiosity. Most of them were empty sidewalks and parked cars. Then, one of the streets stopped me cold. I didn't move for a few seconds because I recognized the layout. The same slope, the same fence at the corner. It was my street. I clicked the next link under that address. It switched to a view from across the road, pointing directly at my house. I stared at the front door on the screen and then looked at it in real life. The angle was identical to someone standing on the sidewalk and recording without being seen. I checked my window to make sure no one was out there, but it was too dark to see anything. There was another link under the same section. Hallway Night. I hovered over it for a moment because something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't ignore. I clicked anyway. The feed opened after 1 second of static, and I felt panic. I was looking at the upstairs hallway inside my own home. The camera pointed towards Sophie's room. The timestamp was live. My hands started shaking in a way I couldn't hide from myself. I sat in that chair trying to understand how someone could record the inside of my house without me noticing. I didn't have any cameras there. Nothing made sense, and the fear didn't give me time to think straight. Everything felt too real. I walked upstairs slowly because I didn't know if someone was inside the house. Every sound made me stop for a second. When I reached the hallway, everything looked normal. Sophie's door was closed. The carpet was untouched. I checked the walls, the lamps, the corners near the ceiling. I didn't find any device. I wanted to believe the video was old, but the timestamp on the screen didn't stop. The next morning, I tried to make it sound like a normal conversation with Sophie, even though my voice kept shaking in ways I couldn't control. "Did you leave your phone camera on at night?" "No." "Then stop using the phone so late. Just put it away." "Why are you acting weird?" I didn't know how to answer without scaring her, so I ended the talk before she pushed more. The moment she left for school, I tore apart every device we owned. I smashed the laptops. I broke the tablets. I took apart the old phones we kept in a drawer. The fear felt like a weight I couldn't get off my chest. I didn't want any camera inside my home again. That night I tried to sleep, but my nerves kept waking me up every few minutes. I felt watched, even with the lights off and the electronics destroyed. I couldn't shut off the idea that the feed might still be active somewhere. Around 2 a.m., my phone vibrated. It was a text message from a private number. It had a link and one sentence telling me to open it. I stared at the screen for almost a full minute because I didn't want to touch it. My hands were sweating and my breathing got fast again. But fear has a way of pushing you toward things you don't want to face. I clicked. A page opened with my daughter's full name at the top, her school, her favorite food, her online accounts, places she visited often. There were folders filled with information that no one should have access to. At the bottom was one folder marked Home Alone Files. I pressed it, even though my whole body was tense. There were many videos inside, all recent, all taken without her knowing. One showed her brushing her hair after school. Another had her laughing on the phone. When I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw it. It was a folder titled Bed View. I froze, terrified of what I was going to find. I opened the folder. There were hundreds of videos of Sophie sleeping, taken from inside the room. And there was another one with the camera placed close to her face. I paused it because I felt dizzy, like my chest was closing in. A new text appeared. "You watched people. Now it's your turn." My vision blurred for a moment. I wiped my eyes and kept staring at the message. Nothing about this felt like something I could control anymore. I stayed awake until morning because I couldn't risk closing my eyes. The next day, I searched her room again. I moved every piece of furniture. I checked every vent. I ran my hands across the walls looking for holes or lenses. I didn't care if I destroyed everything. Sophie stood in the doorway asking what I was doing, and I couldn't give her a real answer. I kept pulling things apart because the fear had already taken over every thought I had. Then, my phone vibrated again. "Stop searching." I felt nauseous as more texts appeared, one after another. We told you to stop. You broke your devices. We added ours. You wanted to watch. Now watch yourself lose control. I dropped the phone. Every corner of the house felt unsafe. I kept waiting for another message. Look outside. I didn't want to go near the window. I took a few slow steps because I felt like someone was watching from the dark. When I finally looked, a car was parked across the street, with its lights off. A small blinking light flashed inside, slow and steady like a device recording. Another message came. Last warning. You took from others. Now we take from you. This does not end. The car engine started. The taillights turned red. It drove away slowly, as if whoever was inside wasn't worried about being followed. I didn't move from the window for a long time. I couldn't decide if I should keep watching or hide. The messages stopped, but the damage was already done. Weeks have passed and the fear hasn't faded. I haven't slept a full night. Every small sound makes me walk through the hallway to check on Sophie. I keep the windows locked and the curtains closed. I don't touch anything with a camera. I don't want to see anything. I don't want anyone to see us. Sometimes late at night, I think I see a blinking light far down the street. I don't know if it's real or if I'm too scared to trust what I see. But I know one thing with certainty. Someone out there has videos of my home, my daughter, our private life. Someone watched us while we slept. Someone felt entitled to do it because I watched strangers first.
I used to live with my older brother Eric when everything happened. The last months had been hard on him because his girlfriend left him for another guy. Since then, he barely spoke or ate. I kept trying to distract him, but nothing made a difference until one night when I asked him to stay in my room while I checked some nonsense sites on the dark web like I used to do for fun. I never took it seriously, and I thought it might give him something else to think about for a while. We sat together as I clicked through forums and random pages, and even though he didn't laugh, he stayed close, which felt better than seeing him curled in bed all day. When he went to his room later, I felt like I had done something useful, because for the first time in days he didn't seem completely crushed. I didn't consider that he might return to those pages alone. I didn't think he would take any of it seriously. I didn't understand how quickly things were about to get worse. The next morning, I found Eric sitting in the exact position I had left him the night before, with the laptop open and his eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't react when I entered the room, and when I asked if he was okay, he simply said he needed to finish something. His tone was empty, like he didn't care that I was even there. I left him alone, but the hours passed and he didn't move. He didn't eat, he didn't talk. The next day was the same, and by the third day, I knew he wasn't just distracted. He was obsessed with something, and every time I tried to ask him about it, he told me he was busy. I saw him typing fast one moment and staring at the screen without blinking the next. The whole thing made me uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to pull him out of it, and I kept telling myself that at least he wasn't lying in bed like before. What I didn't know was that what he was doing had crossed a line long before I realized anything was wrong at all. A few days later, I was in bed reading a book until I heard the window behind me slide open. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. My whole body stiffened. When I turned around, I saw a man climbing into my room. He wore a hood pulled low over his face, and he stepped onto the floor. My heartbeat became painful, and I pushed myself back against the headboard as my legs trembled. I didn't know what he wanted. He walked toward me without rushing. I tried to speak, but my voice broke before any words came out. The man stopped next to the desk and looked at me like he was checking whether I posed any threat at all. I felt too weak to move. But then his attention shifted toward the hallway, and everything inside me tightened even more because I realized he wasn't here for me. He was waiting for someone else. Eric charged into the room so suddenly that the man took a step back. Eric didn't say a word. He went straight for him and the room exploded into chaos. The tension rose as they collided, knocking my chair over and pushing the desk against the wall. Eric tried to grab the man by the shoulders to force him down. The man reacted fast, slamming Eric against the side of the desk with a strength that didn't match his size. Eric groaned and tried to push back, but the man grabbed his wrist and twisted it in a way that made Eric stumble. I watched them move around the room, hitting furniture and walls as each tried to overpower the other. The man wrapped an arm around Eric's throat and pulled him backward. Eric tried to pry the arm off, but the grip didn't loosen. They staggered across the room, bumping into my bed. I slid away from the edge, shaking uncontrollably, unable to get any of my limbs to respond the way I wanted. I felt trapped in my own body, breathing too fast to speak or stand. My chest tightened until it hurt and I couldn't think clearly enough to help. I was having a panic attack and I couldn't help my brother. Eric tried to elbow the man, but he couldn't break free. The man shifted his position and locked both arms around Eric's neck. Eric's legs bent under him, and he fell to his knees while still trying to push him away. The room filled with the sound of Eric struggling for air, and I felt my vision blur from the panic that kept spreading through me. My hands dug into the blanket, and I couldn't stop shaking. Eric's arms slowed down, and his hands slipped from the man's arms. His body lost strength and leaned to the side. The man kept holding him until Eric stopped moving completely. When he let him go, Eric fell hard against the floor, his head tilted and his eyes half open. The man stood still for a moment, then turned toward me without any rush. The man didn't approach, he only looked at me as if making sure I wouldn't interfere, then climbed out through the window and disappeared. I crawled to Eric with shaking hands, calling his name even though I already knew he wouldn't answer. I touched his shoulder and tried to turn him, but his body was heavy and limp. My throat closed up and the panic still wouldn't stop. I sat against the bed frame with my hands on my face, trying to breathe without falling apart. I stayed like that until I finally managed to call the police. They searched the house for prints or signs of forced entry, but they didn't find anything useful. The days after the investigation were empty and silent. I barely slept, and every small sound made me look toward the window. I tried to stay in the living room, but every night I ended up back in my room because I didn't know where else to go. A month later, I woke up to an email with no subject. At first, I thought it was spam, but the moment I opened it, my stomach dropped. There was a link in a folder of images. The link went to a Wikipedia page explaining what a white hat hacker was. The images showed screenshots from the dark web with Eric's username and a conversation that made my hands turn cold. He wasn't asking for advice or venting about the breakup, he was negotiating with someone. He was paying for his ex to be killed. The date matched the same days he spent locked to the laptop. The last image showed the payment confirmation and the username of the hitman. It was the same mark I had seen on the hooded man's gloves. I stayed in front of the screen for a long time, trying to understand how Eric could have done something that extreme. He had always been a good brother to me, and seeing his words on those screenshots didn't match the person I knew. My hands trembled as I clicked through each image, hoping to find something that would prove they were fake, but everything matched too well. He tried to use a killer the way someone uses a random website, but it all ended in a deadly trap for him. That man hadn't come to hurt me. The email wasn't a threat. He wanted my brother to learn his lesson and for me to know what kind of person Eric was. I knew there were hackers who set traps for criminals. I always respected their work, but Eric was my brother, and I lost him. I shut the laptop. I didn't want any trace of those images near me again. I didn't tell the police about the email. I didn't want to destroy whatever was left of Eric's name. The whole thing ended for me the night he died. The police closed the case after months of nothing. They said they would contact me if anything came up, but I stopped expecting any news. Some nights I wake up thinking I heard a noise and I stay still for minutes waiting to see if something moves in the darkness. I know it's just my mind, but the fear doesn't go away.